Antivaxxers of Reddit, what made you change your mind? Honestly, when I was about 25 years 10 plus years ago, I was on the fence about vaccines, in general. One of my old relatives, she was over 90, passed away and I was going through her things. One was a series of postcards she wrote to her uncle as a girl. She kept trying to get her uncle to come visit her baby brother. She was so excited to have a little brother as she only had sisters. Then in next few postcards the baby is sick. Then he is really sick. Baby brother has whooping cough. He dies. Seeing the grief and sadness play through a series of postcards damn near 100 years ago, from a child's perspective, impacted me in a way I could have never predicted. I've always been pro-vax, but it's forever emotionally moving when people in their 80s talk about how polio impacted them as children, even if they themselves didn't get it. One elderly man I know explained to me how it was normal for a few of his classmates to die every summer from polio. He said it so nonchalantly, which was jarring, but makes sense because it was such a routine part of starting school each year, realizing that James or Sarah from down the street got polio and died, which is why their desks were empty. That is the thing that makes me so upset about anti-vaxxers. It's a slap in the face to parents that lost their children from disease before vaccines were available. As someone that has suffered from asthma all my life, I've been through multiple attacks and even a few that were really quite serious, I have always been able to keep calm and work my way through it, able to tell if I can get through it with inhalers or if I need outside help. Whooping cough is absolutely terrifying. There is not being able to breathe but still being able to get shallow even breaths to keep you conscious and responsive. But then whooping cough does none of that. You just cough and cough and cough. Heartbreaking to see that to a baby. Studying microbiology currently, and this was in my last lecture on the topic of vaccines. In 1736 I lost one of my sons, a fine boy of 4 years old, by the smallpox taken in the common way. I long regretted bitterly and still regret that I had not given it to him by inoculation. This I mention for the sake of the parents who omit that operation, on the supposition that they should never forgive themselves if a child died under it. My example showing that the regret may be the same either way, and that, therefore, the safer should be chosen. Interestingly, inoculation here doesn't refer to a vaccine at the time. That'd be generated much later with the eponymous vaccinia virus, but rather the process of variolation, which involves inoculating someone not with the attenuated strains of later vaccines, but with actual real smallpox with a death rate of about 2%. Lower than smallpox's 30%, but still humongous, considering they didn't know about the different strains of smallpox virus, nor much about virology at all. This was understandably a very difficult sell. When I would see reports of the vaccine doing damage, I decided to do my own research. Kept seeing headlines of the vaccine giving you blood clots and realized it has a 0.0006% chance of doing that. I began to get skeptical of all these headlines I was seeing and realized the numbers were extremely low. Out of 6 million people, one person would get a bad side effect and it would be all over news along with millions of people reposting it. Called up my friend who goes to medical school and she explained to me how the vaccine was created quickly, the benefits of it, etc. etc. I cringe at the fact that I was anti-vaccine and I'm able to see through a lot of misinformation without even trying. Realized it's so easy to manipulate people and TikTok promotes so much misinformation for COVID, it's crazy. You can report that all you want, the moderators are extremely anti-vax and they have the most conspiracy theories on mask and COVID on that damn app. Getting out of the mommy forum echo chamber. When I was a new mom, I found myself being very lonely, home all day with this tiny human and no one else to talk to, and was quickly being disabused of the idea that I knew how raising a child works, relatively normal new mom stuff. So I did what I normally do when I don't feel I know what I'm doing. I turned to the internet and started reading articles and joining forums for moms to get ideas, tips and pointers from more experienced moms. I learned a lot from them, and I'm grateful for it. Being low income, I learned all about modern cloth diapers and started doing that for my daughter. Started using cloth pads for myself. They taught me things about circumcision that I'd never heard before. Not that it was ever relevant. I have 2 girls, but it was still eye-opening. Learned about several different techniques on how and when to introduce solids into baby's diet. Learned so much more about car seat safety than the one prenatal class I got before baby was born. Even learned some household budgeting tricks that helped us out. But there was an undercurrent in this very natural crunchy mom group of delayed vaxxing and anti-vax. There was a couple of moms who claimed their children were harmed by vaccines, and had a lot of links to show how vaccine injuries are underreported, etc. By that point, my first child had most of her vaccines with no reaction but a mild fever with one of them, so I only pushed off her varicella vaccine until she was older. But I then delayed most of the vaccines for my youngest, with the idea that if I waited to get them and spaced them out more, she'd be older and more able to tell me if something was wrong. Because if these ladies could be so right about so many other things, how could they be so wrong about vaccines? As my youngest got older, that group more or less imploded due to infighting between different factions, and while some did reform elsewhere, it was mostly for moms of babies and toddlers, and my kids were too old. So I drifted away from them and started seeing all of the anti-vax hate. It took me a while to even entertain looking into the arguments. No one enjoys finding out they're wrong, but I finally did look, and yeah, I was wrong. Fortunately, nothing bad came of it, but still, I fell victim to groupthink, and it could have ended badly. Man, the hormones and exhaustion and insecurity can really wear you down. And you start to feel like if there's something you can do for your kid, that feels like you're thinking very carefully about something. It's easy to fall into that. I had about a minute where I wondered about delayed vax, like, maybe something to it. And then I asked my daughters about it. Before my daughter was actually born, I was seeing if we wanted to go with her practice when I was about 6 months pregnant. And this very hippy-dippy, crunchy, holistic, probiotics, gut health obsessed, seriously, she's still too crunchy for me sometimes, looked straight at me and said, "Number, there is no reason. These have been tested for years and you could put your child at risk." And that kind of stopped me in my tracks. But especially if you're feeling a little isolated postpartum, I can see how it happens. I'm a member of several mom groups for kids with autism. I regularly witness moms becoming anti-vaxxers through proximity to the groups. It starts with the new mom asking with genuine openness about people's opinions about vaccines. The replies from anti-vaccine moms are so thorough and voluminous, giving recommendations for which doctors accept delayed or no-vax families, links to exception forms for schools, links to advocates for legal help, reasonable-sounding biological explanations of why vaccines are damaging, not to mention heartbreaking stories of their kids or them being damaged by vaccines that they easily drown out the pro-vaccine posts. There have been times where I've had to analyze if my very pro-vaccine stance is reasonable because it seems like everybody is against it. It's an illusion, but it's because those voices are so much more passionate than the "what your pediatrician says" responses. My whole family, including my parent, are anti-vaxxers, so I got out of having to get shots like the other kids at school. My parent told me that the shots were bad and dangerous, and as a kid who hated getting shots, how could that not be true? Pain equals bad. Anyways, the internet calling anti-vaxxers crazy made me start to really question the reasoning as I got older. But I was still scared of vaccines because I didn't understand how they worked. After high school I decided that I would rebel and get vaccinated. The only problem was, I had no idea where to get vaccinated or how. I went to the on-site medical center on my school's campus, but I got embarrassed and left. Then, COVID hit, and I had the decision shoved in my face and there was no more running from these choices. My cousin stole some COVID vaccination cards, so I had the option to use a falsified document in place of getting vaccinated. I declined the offer. About a week later, I go to CVS to face my biggest fear and get my very first vaccine ever. In a horrible twist of fate, that very same day, My cousin who stole the cards died suddenly of COVID-19. That was a slap in the face like I have never felt in my life. He left behind a pregnant widow, found out she was pregnant after his passing, and an infant son. His death changed no one in my family's tune. This weekend I'm going to the funeral to pay my respects. I will have to bite my tongue when my whole family barks about all their conspiracy theories about how he actually died. Needless to say, I'm convinced more than ever. If you haven't yet been vaccinated, please do so. Please don't be embarrassed. You were a child and your parents made those decisions for you. When I went to university a very long time ago, in the UK, a girl that was at pre-enrollment thing at the same time as me was really upset. My mom took her to one side and spoke to her. She told my mom she hadn't had any vaccines and we had to provide proof of certain vaccinations. We were on a nursing course. My mom told me she needed to go off for a bit but would be back in a couple of hours. I remember being really embarrassed that my mom was getting involved in someone else's life, as you do when you are 18. My mom took her to the uni medical center and they worked out a schedule of vaccinations. She had to delay her uni start date by 6 months, but we did become friends and she said that everyone was super nice and understanding about it but she couldn't tell her parents. My mom also went with her for her first lot of the vaccines as she was scared. She kept saying how lucky I was with my parents as she had been crying for over an hour and my mom was the only person to approach her. Most people had their parents with them. Obviously now looking back I see my mom did something really nice and as my daughter gets closer to the same age that I was, I would do the same in that situation. Ask someone for support, if you need it, to go to a doctor. There's no shame in asking for help and most people are willing to help. I think you're very brave for what you've done. It takes a lot of courage to go against what everyone in your environment keeps telling you, even when you know it doesn't add up. As others have said, please don't be afraid to get other vaccinations. It's not your fault you weren't vaccinated by your parents. And I'm sure the people working with you will have encountered others in the same position as you as the children of anti-vaxxers get older and make their own decisions. I am concerned about the funeral, though. I can't tell you not to go to a relative's funeral, but a lot of unvaccinated, unmasked, not socially distancing folks in a closed space sounds unsafe. Even if you've received a dose of the vaccine, you can still catch COVID. And it doesn't sound like any of them are going to do anything to minimize it, so it's up to you to decide what your safest course of action is. Maybe the best way to honor your cousin right now would be to ensure you don't die with him. If I knew of anyone who was like you and simply was scared to go, I'd gladly take them all the way in to get the vaccine. It didn't take 2 hours from the invitation got in my electronic inbox. We have a government-issued email sort of system that everyone gets, till IHF signed up for the earliest shot, same with the second. I got both during a weekend so I could get a bit time should I get sick afterwards. I was really tired the day after, that's all. Greater than I will have to bite my tongue when my whole family barks about all their conspiracy theories about how he actually died. Needless to say, I'm convinced more than ever, if you haven't yet been vaccinated, please do so. You'll feel better if you don't bite your tongue. There's this sick form of discourse in America where people feel if it doesn't change someone's mind then why bother saying something. It's important to confront people with what they don't want to acknowledge or hear. And yeah, fucking do it at a funeral where people will remember it for years. These ignorant bastards don't deserve the ignorant bubble they live in. If you live in the US, you might have a county health department. The rural community I grew up in has an office that's staffed part-time where vaccinations are administered that are not part of a regular doctor's appointment. Step on a rusty nail on Sunday afternoon, get a tetanus booster Monday afternoon during regular hours, need the meningitis vaccine before college, call and schedule the first and the follow-up appointments, need vaccinations prior to traveling abroad, call the local county health department to find out what's needed and to schedule an appointment. Grew up in an anti-vax household, got a bachelor's in biochem and was about 2 years into my PhD in physiology when I finally got vaxxed. Took a lot of years of learning science and developing critical thinking skills. Thankfully both of my siblings got vaxxed as adults too. They were smart and figured it out younger than me. Unfortunately my mom is still anti-vax and won't get the COVID vaccine. I'm immunocompromised and it's hard not to feel like she doesn't care about me when she refuses to get vaxxed, or wear a mask in public. No, I haven't seen her much in the last 1.5 years. It's so crazy how many relationships have been destroyed because of politics. I've lost so many friends. People lose their parents and grandparents to Fox News. Stuff like that never ends. The worst part is when you try and go fuck it, they're family to me. I just won't ever bring up politics. I want to get past it and not think about it. Then, for whatever reason, they just have to bring up politics. That's what breaks everything. You can talk about the weather or city, and they'll just start talking about politics. That's what I just can't do. For me at least, getting the vaccine has never been a political thing. Science says getting the vaccine is almost certainly in everyone's best interest, so I vaccinate. The legit only reason why the vaccines are still considered experimental are because long-term trials weren't a possibility, so we don't know the long-term effects. But considering the urgency of COVID vaccines, I can hardly blame them for rushing it. The FDA has officially approved it, and it's free, so there should be no excuses now. Don't be the reason why your family catches the virus. Be safe, everyone. I wouldn't say I was a full-on anti-vaxxer, but I was pretty arrogant about feeling the vaccine was unnecessary for me. Since the Delta variant, I decided to go get the shot because although I'm relatively young, 33, I still am technically obese, 5'9" 225 thick athletic build, and stay pretty active. I'm a black man who also has chemically corrected high blood pressure and type 2 diabetes. I'd be an absolute fool to not do anything to prevent a serious COVID infection. I'm mid-20s, slightly overweight but otherwise healthy and currently continuing to lose weight and work out, etc. I got a minor case of COVID in April, no cough or fever even. I now am a long alert with heart damage, circulatory issues, body temperature regulation issues, chronic fatigue syndrome, post-exertional malaise etc. Anything above 70 degrees Fahrenheit or more than a flight of stairs and I start feeling incredibly sick. There's more than death to be worried about from COVID. Glad you got the shot. Protect yourself, protect others. Edit a word. In case there is someone else that has this logic. The reason that most vaccines take a long time to develop are money and cases. Money. It costs millions of dollars to develop a vaccine, but it does not cost that all at once. There are checkpoints along the way, phases. Most of the time it makes sense for a company to wait until one phase ends to start the next. However, with COVID, people would line up to get a vaccine, so a company knew that they could invest in a vaccine that is likely good and still make the money back. Cases. A large portion of the approval process is testing the vaccine on people. Are there side effects? How effective is it? Are there complications if a patient has disease? Generally, getting people who are willing to take a new vaccine for a disease that is scary enough that people are investing in a vaccine is really hard. Plus then observing those people for up to a year, I think. However, with COVID was not hard to find people willing to try out a new vaccine since we were in a pandemic and significant portions of the population had the disease. The roadblocks cast aside, a COVID vaccine could go through the exact same process as any other vaccine much faster. I work at a medical research university. The vaccine wasn't too soon. The techniques for developing this type of the vaccine have been going on for several years. We only needed to isolate the genome of COVID-19, happened in late March or early April 2020, and then the process of manufacturing the vaccine and beginning trials could begin. The vaccine wasn't available until December 2020, even though that doesn't seem like very long. People were chomping at the bit to be test subjects. Plus, very often funding is a factor. We realized that this vaccine was very important, so the government ponied up right away. All things considered, that's not a rushed and means emergency use access. not experimental use access. My employer is requiring vaccines to continue working. Students are also required. Evidently, there have been several coming back to campus, who previously tried to get an exemption, but have changed their minds because now they're away from the people who wanted them to have the exemption in the first place. Kind of telling, no.